Congressman Quigley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, sir, for being so patient. I, too, am not accustomed this long into being at the end of the questioning, but it does afford us an opportunity to try to put this in the larger picture. You know, one side says blame, the other side says accountability. And doing what you did in the private sector, you recognize accountability. Appreciate the fact that it would be hard to sense that you are accepting it now. You've accepted the responsibility for the delays, but we're still not clear what changes took place and what were yours. Under Ms. Lawrence's questioning, you said you stopped the pilot program when you stopped everything else. Let me ask you, what in your mind were you stopping besides the pilot program?
I stopped the removal of collection boxes around the country. I stopped the process of reducing hours at postal retail centers, and I stopped the removal of the flat and mail sortation boxes, machines.
So your argument for doing that is that you saw that your argument for doing that was that it wasn't working, or
no? They were. It just. I met with the Speaker and Senator Schumer, and we just collectively thought about the heightened discussion that was going on around the nation. And
respectfully, sir, why that, and not the overtime issues, and not the sorting machines? I mean, why did you pick those and not the others, which seem to have pretty dramatic impacts, given the fact that things didn't go well? Wouldn't you want to look back, coming from the private sector, and say, gee, maybe that is impacting us negatively? Was there some other reason you're thinking, well, no, I'm not going to change those?
Not change the truck schedule and
the overtime, the sorting machine?
Overtime. I have spent $700 million, and we have spent $700 million.
You recognize that there are many, including in my district, post office locations which are cutting back on overtime. They're following somebody's order, and you won't mention who that is. So back to accountability, you got to admit you own it, right?
How do you know that they're cutting back on overtime?
Imagine, or let me put it another way. Are you certain that they're not cutting back on overtime?
The direction was given to stop cutting back on overtime in postal retail centers.
When was that
certain? I haven't done an audit yet, but I would believe they're pretty compliant.
Wait, when was that order given? Was that part of the order you just talked about?
I don't know what you're asking me.
Are you saying when you stopped everything else, it included the overtime issue as well?
There was no directive to reduce overtime anywhere within the organization.
And are you certain that no one was cutting back on overtime?
No, I'm not certain. That's part of the problem at the Postal Service, sir. That's what I'm trying to get my hands around. There is a lot of, and that's why I did the reorganization.
Respectfully, you can imagine, though, that
there's a lot of judgment made in local areas that is not a normal.
You're being selective in what you're taking credit for and not. And a cynical person could say you're just trying to avoid going before the regulatory body. Because these aren't changes, but when your own, as you say, you're a Republican, when your own party says, did you stop these changes, you said yes. And in your documents, you talk about the fact that there were changes. You can't have it both ways. There were changes. You seem to have a line there that you don't want to have because it means you have to go before the regulatory board, and you don't want to do that.
It sounds like weak.
Sounds like what happened.
Sounds like a weak theory to me.
Did anyone in the administration, have you communicated with anyone in the administration since you were considered for this spot about how to operate USPS?
No.
No one has communicated with you who works in any way with the Trump administration, and you haven't communicated in any way with anyone who works in the Trump administration or the Trump campaign about how to operate post office?
The only time I communicated with someone in the Trump administration was Secretary Mnuchin when we were negotiating the terms of the $10 billion note. And my discussion in generality was early on in my arrival, and in generalities were that I think that we have some opportunities here, looking to try and grow revenue, improve service, and get some cost out.
And what was the direction the other way?
There was no direction. Postal Service is mine to run. There was no direction.
My time's expired.
Your time has expired.